In the afternoon, a 12-year-old was home alone, playing Minecraft, when a stranger in a red pickup truck pulled into their driveway and attempted to break into their house. Meanwhile, 3 cousins were walking to their nearby park when a strange woman, who claimed to know the grandmother of one of them, pulled up in a car. Finally, someone's mother is being stalked for months on end, leading to the stalker finding his way into her house uninvited. Hello and welcome, crack souls of the internet, to Real Reddit Horror, the series where I read horror stories from Redditors that they swear are true. And without further ado, let's dive right into the realm of horror. Home Alone story. This happened over a decade ago, when I was 12 years old. I live in a small town in Oklahoma, and in my neighborhood, the houses are fairly spread apart, separated by woods. It was a school day, so my grandma picked me up from school and brought me home. This was the first year that I got dropped off at my house alone. Before this, I would just go to my grandma's house after school. I would get dropped off at around 3 p.m., and my parents would be home around 4:30. Not that big of a deal. Today, for some reason, my dad wasn't going to be home until later, around 7, and my mom, a teacher, wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. because she had a parent-teacher conference at the school. This happened in early fall, so it wouldn't even be dark until like 8:30 p.m. I did what I usually did when I got home. I ran upstairs, got on my Xbox 360, and played Minecraft with my friends. Today, it was just me and my friend Seth. I was playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door shut in my driveway. No one should have been here until like 7 p.m. My house is set up to where my upstairs has windows that look over my driveway. So, with my mic on and controller in hand, I went to the window to see who it was. Maybe my dad got home earlier than expected. I looked outside. It was a red truck. No one I know drives a red truck. The person pulled into the middle of my driveway sideways, like he owned the place. When I looked out the window, I saw a man with a hat, wearing a big camo hoodie and jeans. It was September, so no one should have been wearing a big hoodie and jeans in Oklahoma. By the time I looked, he was already almost out of view, going up my walkway to my front door. I thought maybe it was one of my dad's friends, or someone my dad hired to do something, but he would usually tell me if someone was going to be coming over. Soon after, I hear a knock at the door, then another. I go to my other window that has a better view of the walkway up to my front door. I see the guy walking back down the walkway. I switch and go back to looking through the windows overlooking my driveway. I'm relaying all of this to Seth, still with my mic on. I tell Seth that he's walking back to his truck now. Instead, he walks past his truck and tries to open my garage side door. At this point, my heart sinks. I tell Seth that this guy just tried to get into my house. Mind you, it is literally broad day at like 5 p.m. Luckily, it was locked, because sometimes we forget to lock it. After he tried the door, he starts walking to my back patio. I drop my headset, and I quietly run downstairs to see what he is doing. I get downstairs and stand behind the wall, so I'm not visible from the back door. I just listen. I hear him try to open the door. Then I hear a thud. It sounded like he dropped a brick on the ground or something. At this point, I'm more scared than I've ever been. I wanted to call my parents or my grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in the house was in my kitchen. I would have to cross my living room to get there, and he would be able to see me if I went into there. A few seconds after the thud, I peeked around the corner, and he was gone. I run back upstairs and put my headset back on, telling Seth that he just tried to open the back door as well. As I'm telling him this, I hear a car door shut. This time, when I look out the window, he finally got in his truck. I looked at the truck closer, and I noticed the only thing he has in his truck bed was a crowbar and shovel. He sat in his truck for what felt like a few minutes. During this time, Seth told me to get my iPod and take a picture of his license plate. He was parked to where I couldn't see it. Then he drove backwards out of my driveway and down the road. A few minutes after he was confirmed gone, I went downstairs to see what the thud could have been. I get to the back door and see that the doormat was moved. Both big plant pots had been moved as well. He was looking for a key. Holy fuck, we have a hidden key back there too. The key to the back door was under one of the smaller plant pots on a ledge near the door, not the bigger ones that he had checked under. I went to the front porch and all the pots looked like they had been moved too. I don't know what I would have done if he was able to find the key, or if he just broke in. After he left, I called my dad and told him what happened. When my dad got home, he had a cop come over, and I told him what happened and gave him a description. The guy never came back. Why didn't your friend call the police for you or tell their parents? It all happened so fast. We were also just dumb kids not really thinking. I'm pretty sure I told him something like, if he breaks in, don't do anything on the mic and call the police. But he didn't even know my address, so it wouldn't matter. That totally sounds right. I was almost taken, along with my cousins. The three of us were basically inseparable growing up, because of our ages being so close together, and the fact that we were all girls under the same household. Old-fashioned logic favoring the boys who can do no wrong was a common experience for us. We were thick as thieves as a result of this, and we rarely went out without another when it came to going out to play. Our home was across from the elementary school we all attended, and sometimes we would play there when the school was closed. This was a time before schools were constantly locked up, but other times we would walk to the nearby park to play, since this was also a time where you could go almost anywhere unsupervised, and if you had a more neglectful family, especially so. The park wasn't too far from where we lived, so it was a quick walk for all of us, worth the time it took to be able to climb on the playset and enjoy the park's other recreational objects. I don't remember what we were talking about at the time, but we weren't far from the park when this person in a car pulled up to us. None of us had seen her before, so when she claimed to know our grandma, it threw us off. She said she lived not far from us and offered us a ride home, but in our guts, I think we all realized something wasn't quite right. Despite not being the most socially aware kids, we refused. But despite the refusal, she kept insisting, saying that our grandma was worried about us, that she needed us home, and all that. We continued to say no to her, and despite continuing to ask, we could hear the growing frustration in her voice. I don't remember too much from here, but the school was right behind us, as it was a fairly big school, with multiple sections and buildings spanning behind a metal fence. We all knew we needed to get away from her somehow. So we started keeping an eye out for something that would help put some distance between us and her. And what popped up? A gate to the school, practically indistinguishable from the fencing, aside from the hinges and some metal chains used when they would actually lock it. And thankfully for us, this wasn't one of those times. We opened the gate as quickly as possible and ran inside, slamming it behind us in case she decided to give chase, and ran as fast as we could across school grounds. We only stopped when we were on the opposite side of the school and hid in the school bathrooms as we waited patiently and fearfully to see if she had followed us. It felt like hours before we felt it was safe enough for us to come out, and yet it was probably 20 minutes at most. Eventually, we got the bravery to peek out of our stall, just to be sure she wasn't quietly waiting for us to show ourselves. And a huge wave of relief came over us as we saw the completely empty bathroom before us. Before long, we decided heading home was the best option for us, since we didn't need that lady to show up again. We were a bit upset about not having gotten to play at the park like we planned, but that wasn't something some video games and snacks couldn't fix. I honestly wonder at the time if we had truly comprehended the situation we had been in. But as kids, I suppose we didn't think about it too much, never even telling our moms or anyone else in the family about our experience. I also only realized recently that she had offered us a ride home, and yet her car was going in the opposite direction of our house towards the park we were heading to. So she would have had to make a U-turn on a street where U-turns were illegal, and I doubt she would risk getting in trouble with the law just to get us home because our grandma was worried. Some details are a bit fuzzy as I am an adult now, and it was so long ago. But this memory has been in my head all these years, and despite the love of my life confirming this was not a normal experience, I can't help but feel like I truly misread the situation. No, don't doubt yourself. This was definitely a haphazard attempt at a kidnapping. The fact she tried to convince you with the typical your adult authority figure is worried or asked me to get you ruse is alone enough to make me agree. You all had a bad feeling as well, and I'm glad your instincts kicked in. So glad you all were safe. Thank you for your kind words. It's just hard to believe because you don't want to believe it happened to you, even when it does. My mom had a stalker. In 1986, when I was about 5, my dad's job moved us from Brooklyn to a bit upstate, and we bought a house in Connecticut. It was quite a change in lifestyle, from a crazy crowded neighborhood to 3 or 4 acres on a windy road in the woods. My mom especially loved the scenery and the quiet. It should be pointed out that my mom was about 27 or so at the time, my dad about 30. All was fine for a while, until my mom grew increasingly uneasy about a man she said she was seeing everywhere she went. When she went to the supermarket, he was there and would smile at her. She took my sister and I to the park one day, and he was sitting on a bench staring at her. There were many more instances, and at some point my mom mentioned it to my dad, who I think kind of wrote it off at the time. He had never seen the guy and figured it was just a coincidence. The town wasn't terribly big. You were bound to run into people over and over. But my mom was adamant, and it began to get more frequent over the course of about a month or so. I can almost recall her always being on edge when we went places, Finally, after one such incident, she called my dad at work crying and said that she was sure now that he was watching her daily movements. She said she was leaving to pick my sister up from nursery school when she noticed a car through the trees on the road about 50 yards up from our driveway. When she got in her car, the other car pulled out and began to follow her. With increasing worry, she drove to get my sister and went in the school. When she came out, she saw the guy, who she said appeared to be her age with sunglasses on, standing by his car, looking at her. She had enough at this point, and her Brooklyn kicked in, and she started yelling all manners of shit at the guy, who promptly jumped in his car and sped off. This was enough for my dad now, who came home from work and promptly called the police. I remember they came to the house and spoke to my parents in the other room. Well, as luck would have it, the police knew exactly who the guy was, as he had been on their radar for a similar incident a few years before with another woman. However, they described him as sort of simple-minded and harmless, and had never threatened anyone or done anything violent. He was just a bit of a weirdo who couldn't take the hint. In what was a stunning display of small-town police ineptitude and sort of stupidity on the part of my father to allow it, the cops said they would speak to the guy and his parents, whom he lived with, and basically tell him to knock it off. Again. And so they did. And that very night, my parents received a phone call from the guy's parents, who apologized profusely and explained their son was a little socially off and never meant to hurt or scare anyone. They basically said that they told him to leave my mom alone or they would get the police involved themselves. And in true naive small-town fashion, everyone just sort of shook hands and let it go. For a year, maybe more, there were no more sightings of him. No incidents. My dad knew where he lived now and occasionally would pass by to see if his car was at his house. I suppose it seemed that the gentle admonishment worked. However, that all changed one summer night in 1987. This part I remember well. It was 9 p.m. and I was in bed, not yet asleep, and I could hear my parents watching TV in the living room. At some point, I heard my sister leave her room and walk down the hall towards the den. Suddenly, there was commotion and an air of panic. It appeared that my sister was having an asthma attack and was really struggling to breathe. This would be the first of many attacks that had her on an inhaler into adulthood. My dad was running one way, my mom another. I heard the shower come on in an attempt to see if the steam would open up her airways. I remember my mom starting to shout that it wasn't working and to call 911. At this point, I got up and stood in the hallway watching this unfold. I remember my dad yelling that he called 911 and that they were on the way. My mom was still in the bathroom trying to get my sister to breathe steam. I'll never forget what happened next. I walked down the hallway towards the den and the staircase that led to the front door. It was a split-level ranch-type house built into the side of a hill, so you had to walk down a flight to get to the front door. I think I was hoping to find my dad, who was probably in the kitchen where the phone was, as I was starting to panic a bit over the situation. However, he ran past me towards the bathroom where my mom and sister were. Suddenly, at the bottom of the steps stood a young man staring up at me. The front door opened wide behind him. I yelled to my parents that the police were here, and I heard footsteps come running down the hallway towards me. It had only been maybe 1 minute since my dad had said he called 911. I can recall thinking, even at 6 years old or so, wow, they got here fast. My mom came up behind me and proceeded to let out the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard. It was the fucking stalker standing there looking at us. I hadn't recognized him, so I was now thoroughly confused as to what was going on. My dad was about 3 seconds behind that scream, and when he got there, my mom screamed, "It's him! It's the fucking guy!" I will never forget the look of utter confusion on my dad's face as he had a daughter in the bathroom starving for air, and his wife suddenly in hysterics over a man standing in his doorway. Like, which fucking thing do you attend to first? Well, this dude took one look at my dad and bolted out the door into the dark. He started to follow, but I think he quickly realized that he knew where the guy lived, and since it appeared he had run off, there was no immediate threat. He yelled at my mom to go into the kitchen, and she grabbed me in a state of blind panic and pulled me with her. About 2 minutes later, the cops arrived, and one of them was a guy present a year earlier after the initial encounters. My mom started screaming, "He's out there! He was watching us!" The cops were completely confused now as well. This was supposed to be a medical emergency, but suddenly it was a home invasion. EMTs were quickly behind the cops and gave my sister a few shots of an inhaler, and she was breathing again. But now all attention was on the stalker, as it was clear that he had been spying on my parents through a window, and his twisted mind thought he could save the day. The cops caught up with him running down the road and arrested him. He admitted under questioning that he had been going for drives at night for months now and watching my mom through the windows from the woods. He didn't really seem to understand what the big deal was. He pled guilty to trespassing and some sort of stalking-related crime and went to jail, though I'm not too sure for how long. I have often thought about going back there to take a look at what records are available on the case. Nothing seems to exist online. According to my parents, the lack of any threats or actual violence sort of rendered the story not newsworthy. My mom was so freaked out that my dad put in for a transfer, and we were back in Brooklyn by the fall. Although it's taken over 35 years, my mom can now tell the story with a laugh, but I don't think she ever got over that night. We found out from old neighbors years later, in the late 90s, that the guy had been in a group home post jail and died from a heart attack. Oh yeah, he's done it before. What the fuck do you mean? Don't worry, he's not dangerous, just simple-minded. Glad your mom and sis are okay. Hope you're doing well, but what the fuck to the police. I asked my mom about this over Christmas. Apparently, the first incident was fairly benign as far as she could recall. Things were a bit different back then. A lot of things were brushed over if there was no real crime. He was a weirdo who annoyed a local woman. The cops yelled at him and he stopped. He was probably up to all manner of weird shit, but they only knew about this one woman who made a complaint. No arrest was made. It sounded like the woman was more annoyed than scared. I hope he got the help he needed. If not, I hope he's rotting in hell. If you know of any stories you would like for me to read, or if you have your own, feel free to add them to the comment section. Thank you for watching. I've been Crackso Spinner, and until the next story, I'm just in my room.